Will the Committee of Supply please come to order? This section of Committee of Supply will now consider the estimates of the Department of Finance. Does the Honourable Minister have an opening statement?
Yes.
Okay. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you so much. So just maybe want to speak briefly by talking a bit about the importance of the budget we released recently. I was very proud to bring forward a budget that responded to the challenge of the moment that Manitoba is facing. We know that the threats that we face from tariffs to the south of us, from Mr. Trump, have created significant uncertainty and worry for Manitoba families, communities, businesses, and that those tariffs and the threats that they present to our economy are concerning, and that it was very important for us as a provincial government to make sure that we responded to those threats. And I think that this budget did exactly that. It responded to the threat of the moment, and it was focused on ensuring that not only did we continue to do the incredibly important work that our government has been doing since getting elected, which is focusing on starting to fix the damage that was done to our healthcare system, focusing on improving affordability in Manitoba, improving their safety and their security in our communities, but also ensuring economic resilience, sustainability, and a stronger economy for years to come. And I was so proud that this budget leaned heavily into a lot of really important investments that will help us to ensure that we do just that, including, of course, the centerpiece of the budget being the $3.7 billion capital plan that we were really proud to bring forward, where we committed to build 11 schools, 3 personal care homes, new important infrastructure to support Manitobans getting their health needs met, for example, the new ER at the Vic, and including economy supporting sustaining infrastructure like our investments that we've committed to making in the Port of Churchill, the rail line, Centerport, as well as NUPIC, which was a very important, of course, water project that we know we need to move forward with to ensure our economic engine, Winnipeg, can continue to grow and thrive. So those are, I think, some centerpieces of the budget that we're really proud of and I think responded to the threat of the moment. In addition to a lot of other areas of focus, for example, finally building the energy we require to meet our needs of a growing province. So 600 megawatts of wind we've announced in partnership with First Nations will help to ensure that we can meet the energy needs of Manitoban citizens, but also, of course, the growing energy needs for our businesses. We also, of course, in this budget leaned into other important areas. For example, Buy Canadian. We know that Manitobans right now and all Canadians are making different purchasing decisions where they are focused on ensuring that when they spend their dollar, that they're doing that in such a way that creates the greatest possible benefit for our local economies. And I'm proud to say that our government has committed to doing the same and that our Buy Canadian legislation leans into that and will see us working to ensure that their government, the Manitoba government, makes similar decisions when we spend provincial dollars, that we're getting the best return for Manitobans on those expenditures. Of course, other important areas of focus that I'm really proud of include our focus on interprovincial trade barrier reduction. We've seen great progress from our Premier and the work that's being done by our Minister for Jobs in working with colleagues across the country, and exciting things are coming very soon. Beyond that, maybe I'll just speak briefly to some of the other important things we've done to help support a more resilient economy here. Our payroll tax cut is reducing taxes for small and medium businesses, making Manitoba into an even more investable destination for capital. We, of course, made further investments in tourism to encourage folks to visit our beautiful province and to spend dollars with our local businesses, great opportunities for them. And, of course, to encourage Manitobans to stay right here in Manitoba, to continue to support local. And then just so much other good news in the budget, and including, of course, a number of important investments that we've made to support some real key local job producers, for example, Magellan, and NFI, who now, in partnership with our government, are now in a position to be able to do an all-Canadian build electric bus. So the work of building a more resilient and sustainable economy in light of those tariffs, I think, is ongoing. I think our budget showed the way forward. I was really proud last week to spend many days out east visiting with credit rating agencies, giving them clarity on our fiscal plan and our path forward in addition to investors and spelling out the important work that we did to ensure that our provincial government has a fiscally sustainable path forward, but also to outline the important work we've done to make sure that Manitoba's economy can continue to grow and develop and thrive. And that message was really well received. It was exciting to meet with investors abroad to hear just how confident they are in our path forward as a province, and to hear that excitement from them. So I think that reflects the good work that our government is doing, led by our Premier. And again, that work continues. And I'm pleased to be here today to have a chance to answer any questions from the official opposition. Thank you very much.
We thank the minister for those comments. Does the critic from the official opposition have an opening statement? The member for Midland.
Thank you, Chairperson, and I will keep my opening comments brief, as I do look forward to digging into the details of the Finance Department, and Manitobans deserve to hear direct and factual answers from this minister. We are seeing in this budget and the finance documents significant new tax increases on Manitobans at a time when Manitobans are faced with a cost of living crisis, the highest foodflation in the country, decreasing job growth, and increasing unemployment. Combined with weak economic growth, market volatility, and the current state of global trade, we continue to face unprecedented US and China tariffs on our key Manitoba industries. This budget missed the moment for Manitobans, as evidenced by the lack of trade strategy for Manitoba and the lack of meaningful solutions and a tangible path forward. Despite those significant challenges facing hardworking Manitobans, this NDP government has decided to increase taxes. $182 million in education property tax increases, on top of double-digit school division tax hikes. The decision by this minister to get rid of the 50% rebate, while not taking into account property values and the general assessment that occurs every 2 years, with sloppy financial planning, and Manitobans are paying the price for it. In some school divisions, property owners are seeing over $1,000 increases on their tax bill. Some of these individuals have been in their homes for years, while others are new homeowners. And neither the $1,500 nor $1,600 rebate will provide much relief to those homeowners who are seeing double-digit increases on their tax bills. School divisions are publicly blaming this NDP government in the absence of properly funding education and an equitable education funding model, and homeowners are now bearing the price for this sloppy planning by the NDP government. While cottage owners and business owners are paying significant more in property taxes, as exampled recently by Victoria Beach. These increases are erasing the progress made toward eliminating education property taxes on homeowners, while this NDP is enabling unprecedented historic hikes as a result of removing the cap on school divisions. Homeowners and Manitobans are also faced with increased income taxes, as the NDP has brought back bracket creep by freezing the indexation of income taxes and not adjusting to inflation. This is a sneaky way of increasing taxes on Manitobans, as inflation can bump taxpayers into a higher tax bracket. Increases in wages will not be felt by the taxpayer as a result of being in that higher tax bracket. The NDP continues to place a higher debt burden on Manitobans and future generations. With a deficit of upwards $1.9 billion and debt servicing costs at $2.3 billion, that's $1,700 for every Manitoban just for interest costs to Bay Street and Wall Street lenders. This minister has barely a page in his budget to reduce spending and to reduce the deficit to pay down the debt. There is no credible plan presented to balance the books by 2027, and at his current rate of spending, this is becoming a far-reaching goal. There is a lack of a legislative commitment to reduce interprovincial trade barriers, despite other provinces being well ahead. This NDP government talks a big game, but when it actually comes to taking action and making the commitment, they are significantly falling short. I look forward to digging into these details during the estimates proceedings. It was not too long ago that we sat at this table for the 2024 estimates and the Hydro Committee, where the minister was asked direct questions, and instead of providing answers, he wasted time by reading press releases into the record and reiterated meaningless talking points. Now that he is almost 2 years into his role as finance minister, enough of the smoke and mirrors. Manitobans expect and deserve to hear factual answers about he and his government are managing taxpayer dollars and their hard-earned money. Today, we will dig into some of the details on office expenditures and operations and move forward into the tax increases to get some answers on how that is impacting Manitobans, as well as the province's debt management strategies. With that, I will conclude my remarks, and I look forward to getting the answers that Manitobans expect and deserve as we move forward.
We thank the member. Under Manitoba practice, debate on the minister's salary is the last item considered for a department in the Committee of Supply. Accordingly, we shall now defer consideration of line item 7.1A contained in resolution 7.1. At this time, we invite the minister's staff and the member of the critic for the portfolio staff to come to the table, and we ask that the minister introduce the staff in attendance. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you so much, Chair. I'd like to introduce the team here that's joined me. First of all, I'd like to introduce Paul Brescher, my Director of Ministerial Affairs, Anne Liebfried, the ADM for Central Finance, and Matt Weeb, the ADM for Analysis and Strategy Unit within Treasury Board Secretariat. Thank you so much for being here today with us.
According to our Rule 7816, during the consideration of departmental estimates, questioning for each department shall proceed in a global manner, with questions put separately on all resolutions once the official opposition critic indicates the questioning is concluded. The floor is now open for questions. The Honourable Member for Midland.
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson. And we'll start off with a pretty simple question that the minister should be able to answer fairly quickly. Can the minister please list the political staff that work out of the minister's office or within their purview? And if the minister could please provide the name and the position of those staff.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks so much for the question. So I'm grateful to have a chance to talk about some of the folks that are providing really important supports to us in finance. Of course, we have a bit of a unique role as the Department of Finance in that we're a department that has a number of different areas. And of course, I'm not only have the honor of serving as the Minister of Finance, but I'm also serving as Minister responsible for Manitoba Hydro, Public Service Commission, as well as the Public Utilities Board. And so just a significant number of incredible people working to support what we do in our office. You know, as I think about those teams, one thing I want to highlight is the important work that they do in supporting the development of a budget. I think about, you know, what it takes to bring together a budget and the enormous amount of effort that goes into that. And I want to start by just highlighting the important work that's done by the good folks who work within our Treasury Board Secretariat. They spend you know, months and months and months doing the incredibly important work of you know, putting together the building blocks of what ultimately becomes a budget. And they're the ones who are really working to dig in, understand all the details, make sure that at the end of the day that our plan will land and help us deliver on our goal that we set. And we've worked very hard together over the last year to ensure that we developed a plan that will allow us to deliver on our balanced budget commitment. So, you know, to that end, I think about the inordinate amount of time that our teams in TBS and otherwise have spent with us working towards that goal. Over the past year, and I think especially, you know, last spring into summer, we spent an unbelievable amount of time together, you know, including late nights on the weekend, working through a process of developing multi-year cost structure to ensure that we had a pretty clear line of sight on all of the major expenditure decisions that we were going to need to make over the course of our mandate. And that involved very, you know, intensive analysis and work and support from a huge number of really wonderful folks that you know, put in a lot of time to make sure that ultimately that goal that we set, that audacious goal, which is to make sure that we delivered on a balanced budget in year 4 of our mandate, that could be possible. So that work was done, of course, you know, with support from those amazing folks at Treasury Board Secretariat. We also were really lucky to, of course, have wonderful supports from the Department of Finance and a lot of talented people, some of whom are sitting with us here today, to help us ensure that we had that broader picture, that broader fiscal understanding of where, you know, where our economy was, where it's going, and benefiting from the deep insights from our statistics team working within the department, as well as just some of the great folks that are there that, again, are just helping us to ensure that that broader fiscal picture was maintained as we did that work of developing the budget. So, you know, aside from those amazing people who I want to thank today, thank our amazing team in Treasury Board and Finance and beyond, I'm also lucky to have some really great folks supporting me directly in our office on the political side. So, you know, I'll speak to one of those individuals who's here with me right now, Paul Brescher. I'll embarrass him a bit, but I'll say that, you know, I feel since he's come in to our office, just incredibly fortunate to have had the benefit of his experience, steady hand in helping to guide the work that we do. Just an amazing support. I'm also very lucky to have 2 other direct political support in my office. Ben Deering, who acts as my executive assistant, as well as Jessica Teal, who's my special assistant. She joined us not so long ago and has just done a spectacular job fitting in and again, is providing very important supports, helping to ensure we can deliver on our important mandate, which is to deliver on that balanced budget goal while we continue to make sure that we make life more affordable for Manitobans, which I'm very proud to say we've been doing. Our first budget, you know, helped to focus on reducing the cost of school taxes for Manitobans. That work continued with our last budget. along with other personal income tax reductions that we made. Proud to be doing that work, proud to have this team, and I want to thank everybody that helps to get this job done.
The Honourable Member for Midland.
Thank you, and for the record, it took the minister 5 minutes to list half a dozen staff, so hopefully he can be quicker in his answers and not eat up time that Manitobans are looking for direct answers on. If the minister could please provide, has the minister hired any external consultants or advisors? And if so, if the minister could provide their names, salaries, wages, and/or contract amounts.
The Honorable Minister of Finance.
Thank you so much, Chair. Yeah, it gives me pleasure to talk about some of the folks that we've been fortunate to bring on board to support the work that we're doing. I want to start by talking about one individual that we hired on to support our important work, and that's Trevor Tome. He's a doctor, sort of academic from UCalgary, who folks might recognize as being a frequent commentator on economics and intergovernmental trade, and is a phenomenal expert really in the functioning of provincial economies. We hired him on to help us sort of benefit from his expertise when it came to the potential risks and impacts of tariffs. And we were very fortunate to be able to get very beneficial insights thanks to his work about some of the risks that those tariffs were presenting to our province and to Canada ultimately. Some advice on how we can mitigate those risks and navigate them in the best way possible to result in the best outcomes, economic outcomes possible for Manitobans. And those were insights that we were able to put to good use in our budget development process. One of the great things about, I think, what we were able to benefit from as it relates to Dr. Tome is that not only did he help to inform our budget and how to navigate the tariff risks that we were facing, but he also built capacity. We had him support development within our Department of Finance, and I think that was a very smart way to make sure that we leverage to the greatest extent possible his expertise to not only benefit us in terms of our budget development process, but also to have a leave behind that would ensure that departmental staff were able to benefit from his expertise. So that was something I think was a very smart approach taken by our deputy to use that in that way. He's unfortunately, Deputy Camiloti is unfortunately not able to join us today, but speaks to sort of I think the way that we approached leveraging that kind of expertise. We also, I'm happy to speak to another individual that we were able to benefit from their supports, and that would be Jim Crone. Jim was, I think, a 30-year civil servant within the provincial government here with an expertise on energy, Manitoba Hydro, and Jim retired not so long ago, but we were very proud to bring him back on a contract where he's now helping us to develop the regs as it relates to duty to serve legislation that we were proud to introduce. We know how important that legislation is because for many years, Manitoba essentially was required to simply serve whichever industrial customer was next in line. We had in our legislation a first in, first out system where effectively if you had a significant energy ask, it's 300 megawatts and you only had 5 jobs attached to that, and right behind that industrial proponent was another similar 300 megawatt ask with 100 jobs, we currently have to serve that first person in line, that first organization business in line. And of course, in an era where clean energy, and not only clean energy, but our clean baseload energy has never been more valuable, we have to make sure we make good use of that energy and that we create the highest and best value for Manitobans in terms of how we allocate it. So I've been very proud to have brought him back to help us ensure that we develop those regs in a way that ensures, again, Manitobans get the greatest possible value from our clean energy, and that ultimately we work to keep our rates low as possible. Jim's also working to support other work that we're moving forward when it comes to energy. For example, the 600 megawatts of wind that's going to be developed in partnership with First Nations and the Métis Nation here in Manitoba. Very, very exciting to know that we're moving forward in a way that using a novel approach that's never been used in our province that will create significant opportunities, wealth building opportunities for First Nations that I think really shows the way forward in that it clearly demonstrates our government's commitment to economic reconciliation, to working in collaboration with First Nations in a good way. That really points the way forward, and I think, frankly, shows the way forward in the broadest sense, in that if we're going to continue to develop new sources of energy in Manitoba, they'll need to be developed in a way that ensures First Nations and the Métis Nation are included as part of that work. And that's a very different approach than we saw for many years under the former government, but one that we're proud to take because we know it's the right way forward, the only way forward, and we're going to keep doing that important work. So I thank Jim and Trevor for their important contributions to our work so far.
The honourable member for Midland.
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson. In April 2024, in an order in council, this minister hired an energy advisor by the name of Kenneth Clausen. Clausen's on the record supporting high and increasing carbon taxes, believing that Manitoba's gas taxes are too low, should be as high as 45 cents a litre, and advocating both to eliminate the PST exemption on home heating and rapidly phasing out natural gas in Manitoba. Is Kenneth Clausen still an advisor in the minister's office and to the Minister of Finance?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you so much, Chair. I apologize, but in my last answer, I didn't have a chance to speak to some of the other supports that we've hired on, and I really wanted to have a chance to speak to that a bit further. And then, of course, happy to get to the last question. The first thing that I wasn't able to mention in my last answer was the important supports that were provided to us by MNP. And so shortly after we got into government, one of the challenges that we faced was, of course, the significant deficit that we had been left as a government. And ultimately, Manitobans know that that deficit grew to $2 billion, which was really a deep, deep hole that we were left with and that Manitobans were left with and that we were forced to work to climb out of. And so with the goal of ensuring that we could get clarity on how we got there, we hired MNP, who, phenomenal local or phenomenal independent accounting firm to help us get a better sense of what transpired under the last government that led to that disastrous outcome that they left Manitobans with. And that independent report that they produced, I think, did a really important job summarizing some lessons that our government was able to take away as to what not to do, and really showed at a high level some of the concerning decisions that were made by the former government when it came to fiscal management, economic management. And I'll never forget the main quote from that report was that the former government made decisions that, quote, constituted high budgetary risk. And they went on to spell out in their report that one example of that, and I think one of the worst examples of that, was that they had budgeted in excess of $500 million for hydro profits in their final year prior to the election. Now, to be clear, that is a level of hydro profits that would be far in excess of anything that would constitute a typical net income year for hydro. And, at the very best, this was just sort of irresponsible budgeting, a concerning oversight, maybe an overzealousness with what they expected in terms of hydro profits. On the other end, it's concerning because there's reasons why a government might want to wildly overestimate profits from a crown. So I won't suggest anything further there except to say what we know is that was a very concerning decision that they made in including that level of potential of proposed net income for hydro. And we know that ultimately at the end of the day, they went from a $500 million plus projection, and I think we landed at a place, and I unfortunately can't ask for this off the floor here, but I believe it ended up being negative $100 million. So that single budgetary decision resulted in about a $600 million variance there. That was a major contributor to that outcome, that $2 billion deficit number. And I want to just flag and highlight just how consequential that is. If you think about the importance of Manitoba putting its best foot forward when it comes to the bond markets, investors, credit ratings, that was a massive risk that they created for Manitobans and really showed that the last government did not have the right approach when it came to fiscal leadership and economic decision making. And of course, we know that one of the more concerning things that they demonstrated was unfortunately an unwillingness to show transparency when it came to that. And there was a fiscal update provided in late July, which I remember, which suggested that things were status quo, that there was nothing to see here, and that ultimately the government, which was 3 months away from an election, was doing its best to put forward, I think, a fiscal picture, an economic picture that they wanted Manitobans to believe. Unfortunately, what became clear is that by midsummer, when hydro was facing significant drought that year, they failed to adjust and sort of step up to Manitobans and be honest about where we were. And the result was when they provided that Q1 report at the end of July, 3 months before the election, they really did knowingly provide a very distorted picture of our overall fiscal position. And that was very unfortunate. I would say it lacked transparency. And that's the opposite of what governments should be doing when they're going to Manitobans and providing them with an update on where we were at. And we saw the impacts of that. So proud that we did that important work with MNP. There's other great supports that I'd like to speak to, but again, in regards to the last question asked by the critic, I'm happy to get to that in my following answer.
The Honourable Member for Midland.
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson. And I understand that the minister likes to grandstand and put misleading facts on the record, because the reality is that the former PC government posted 2 surpluses during their time in office, all while through a historic, unprecedented global pandemic, leaving this NDP government with a $373 million surplus that they've now turned into a $1.9 billion deficit. And Manitobans need to remember that that $1.9 billion deficit is this minister's deficit and this NDP's government's deficit, as they've now been in office for almost 2 years. So to get back to the question, and it's a simple yes or no question, whether Ken Klassen, which this minister hired in an order in council in April of 2024, is still employed by the Minister of Finance.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the question. And, I guess given the critic did raise the question of the deficit that we were left, it is important to remind her that, again, the $2 billion deficit that was left was connected to a budget that was PC created. And of course, the MNP report that was done speaks with clarity about who is accountable and who is responsible for that deficit. So that's just the reality of the situation, was that we were left with this giant hole that they had dug due to poor fiscal planning, and that independent MNP report spoke to that failure to plan and ultimately some of the decisions they made that constituted that quote high budgetary risk that left us in a really, really challenging position. Speaking about planning and speaking about important supports that our government hired, we also were really proud to hire Deloitte to support us in doing some of our work to understand some of the risks that were being presented to Manitoba as a result of the tariffs. And of course, during the time that we had hired them, that was a time when Manitoba was facing the risk of 25% tariff scenario across the board. And we needed to make sure that as a government, we had real clarity to the best we possibly could on what the implications of that were. Now, we did that work, that important planning work, to ensure that we were ready and that we were going to bring forward a budget that, again, responded to the moment and the risks that we were facing. And with the benefit of Deloitte, and they had some very advanced models that we were able to benefit from, that we could look at and really understand in various sectors of the economy what those prospective impacts would be. we were able to put together a very comprehensive picture of the impacts. And therefore, with that, the benefit of that, we were able to plan accordingly. Again, something when I'm reflecting on the $2 billion hole we were left, that really wasn't done by the former government. So another great example of really the change that we have seen here in the legislature in terms of moving from an approach to fiscal management that was bereft of foresight, vision, really in-depth analysis, looking ahead, to one where we had a government that was finally focused on actually doing the hard, heavy lifting of planning appropriately for the challenges we were facing as a province. And so what we did there and with Deloitte's support was, I think, really important, really good work. And that work ended up manifesting in our tariff contingency budget. And so I've often heard the critic reference in different environments that their team feels that we haven't prepared or our budget didn't reflect reality. I think this is a great opportunity just to make sure that with no uncertain terms that this record is set straight, that not only did we prepare, we were very transparent with Manitobans about the risks that we were facing. And we're able to do that not through our guesswork or through hoping and praying that things were just going to work out. We did it with the benefit of expert analysis from Deloitte, and that translated directly into what we saw in our tariff contingency budget. And so the tariff contingency budget, as a result, benefited from the specific insights that we learned from Deloitte, and that translated into a revenue contingency proposal that we know reflected the prospective impacts of a full 25% tariff scenario. It also reflected the impacts of the counter tariffs and the impacts of those that we would see specifically on the Manitoban economy and on specific sectors within the Manitoban economy. So I'm really proud. I mean, when I outline this is the work. This is the important planning preparation that Manitobans have a right to expect from their government. And that's exactly what we put forward, a transparent summary of what we were going to do in light of a 25% worst case scenario, tariff scenario. And again, you have a very clear sort of A and B situation here where you can compare as a Manitoban what our government did, the extent to which we prepared, the depths to which we examined and analyzed risks ahead for the upcoming year. That became present in a budget versus a very different approach, which we saw we saw with the $2 billion deficit that they left us with their former budget, which did not account for risks, and it was unfortunately a real reflection on their failure to plan. So with that, happy to share more in a future answer.
Honourable member for Midland.
Thank you, Chairperson. This was a very clear 2 questions now in asking about an order in council that this minister signed to hire Ken Clausen to advise him on energy. Perhaps this minister does not want to answer because Kenneth Clausen is repeatedly on the record encouraging rising carbon taxes. In fact, just a few years ago, and I quote from Hansard, he has said, "The truth of the matter, though, is that whether it's a $25 tax or a $20 rising to $50 carbon tax per ton, that what we're going to be facing a need for much higher carbon tax in the future." Considering this minister and his premier refuse to stand up to the federal government to remove the federal backstop that is currently punishing Manitoba industries that are being faced with Canadian and China tariffs as we speak, this minister and premier refuses to do so. And now, as we've heard, this minister refuses to answer whether the individual who is repeatedly on the record encouraging a rising carbon tax on Manitobans is still employed by this minister or not. So considering he has refused to answer that question, for the past 2 questions, I will move on to another topic because, in fact, economists have disagreed with this minister in terms of his rosy projections for economic growth and revenue. In fact, TD noted that Manitoba counts on the U.S. for a large share of its international imports, exposing households to inflation risk from retaliatory tariffs. Manitoba's key GDP growth industries, manufacturing, agriculture, transportation, risk pulling Manitoba's revenue down, comparable to the 2009 recession. However, despite weak economic factors, this minister projected in his budget that Manitoba would see greater growth in 2025 compared to 2024, with a real GDP increase to 1.7%. But TD Economics have said the government's baseline real GDP growth forecasts are relatively rosy for the economic realities that this province is facing. RBC has made similar statements. So economists are disagreeing with this NDP government's outlook and that their recent budget did not reflect the economic realities that Manitoba is currently facing. So does this minister still project a 1.7% real GDP growth for 2025, ranking it among the last of Canadian provinces, fourth last?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Yeah, I'm very happy to speak to the questions from the critic. So just going back to a question that she asked regarding Ken Klassen. Ken came on board for a very specific reason, and that was to support the development of our affordable energy plan, which our government was very proud to release last fall. Ken has over 30 years of technical expertise in the energy field and provided an important perspective in the development of that energy plan. If anyone wants to see what ended up getting released, I invite all Manitobans to go look at that plan, which is publicly available. And it's an incredibly exciting plan. It shows the way forward in building new energy in Manitoba. I've spoken to the sort of core announcement that came out of that plan, which was our commitment to build 600 megawatts of wind in partnership with First Nations. But it also shows the way forward in a number of other important respects. For example, on duty to serve, which is something we committed to in the plan. And now, again, as a government that follows through on what it says and follows through on commitments, we're now moving forward on that as well with legislation, as I've already been speaking about earlier today. I'll say for the critic, just so she knows, Mr. Klassen is no longer a permanent employee. We thank him for the support he provided in the development of the Affordable Energy Plan, which I know is really well received, and thanks in part to the important supports he provided in helping to develop that. That Affordable Energy Plan was, I think, a remarkable achievement in that we did that plan in a novel way, in a way that represented true collaboration. And I'm very excited actually to say that my colleague, the current Minister for Education and Early Childhood Learning, who sits here with us today, in her previous capacity as a Minister for Environment, we worked very closely together in the development of that energy plan. It was truly a collaborative process between her team, the experts we had in Crown Services, Jim Crone, among others, who I mentioned earlier here today, along with Manitoba Hydro and Efficiency Manitoba, who all sat together for weeks on end, working through a proposal to move our province forward and to ultimately respond to 7.5 years of the last government failing to do what was needed to be done when it came to ensuring that we had energy to support Manitobans, to keep our homes lit and our businesses operating. So we had a lot of work to do, and it was really important that we dug into that energy plan because of how far behind we'd fallen. You know, the PCs like to talk about, you know, they position themselves as a party that, you know, has a focus on business, we'll say. But I'll say, you know, business can't move forward if they don't have energy to do the work that they do. And it's shocking to think about that we spent 7.5 years, like really think about that, 7.5 years without developing any new energy of any kind. And that put us in one heck of a tough position when we came in to government, in that we knew we needed to move with purpose to make sure we dealt with that. Again, there was the $2 billion deficit that they left us. This is another deficit they left us. They left us in a hole when it came to energy, and that we had to move very quickly to put forward a plan. And so proud to say that Ken was one of a large group of individuals who contributed to the development of that plan. And we're very proud of what we did there, and I'm very proud to have worked with our current Minister of Education on that plan. And I think it's something I'll always look back on as something that I'll consider as sort of a key achievement that we did together. You know, speaking about carbon taxes, it's kind of funny to hear the critic talk about, you know, trying to position Ken as, you know, and his take on this policy or that policy. When it comes to carbon taxes, there's only one party sitting in this building that has actively advocated for carbon taxes in Manitoba, and that's the party that belongs to the critic. Her team voted in favor of carbon taxes not once, but twice when they were in power. That's an inconvenient fact. I'm sure she'd like to sort of have us not talk about today, but that's just the reality of the matter. And what I can say to Manitobans who are watching right now is this team will never, ever bring in a carbon tax like that on Manitobans. We will never vote in favor of that type of carbon tax that they supported. They can trust us to continue focusing on improving affordability. That's the work we've been doing so far, and we're going to continue to do exactly that.
The Honourable Member for Midland.
Thank you, Chairperson. I just want to pick up, I do want to get back to the real GDP growth projections. However, the minister mentioned that Kenneth Clausen is no longer a permanent employee. So if the minister could let us know if Kenneth Clausen is a consultant, advisor, still paid in any contractual way through the finance minister's office or finance department or Manitoba Hydro. If not, did he receive a severance? And if so, how much was that severance?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
The question, I believe, from the critic was, has Ken received any severance? The answer to that is no.
The Honourable Member for Midland.
Thank you. If the minister could please answer the first part of my question, which is whether Ken Clausen is a consultant or advisor to the minister. He mentioned that he is no longer a permanent employee. but is he a consultant advisor through the finance minister, the minister's office, the finance department, or Manitoba Hydro currently?
The Honorable Minister of Finance.
Thank you so much. So to the critics' question, in those instances where in my role I do require some form of technical expertise, we do continue to have access to Ken's services on an on-demand basis, but there's a base of 0 there. So, in those situations where there's a need for me in my role to understand something technical, I can reach out and leverage his 30 plus years of experience as a well-respected energy expert here in Manitoba.
The Honorable Member for Midland.
Okay, thank you, and I appreciate the minister answering that question finally. I would like to just go back to a previous question I asked regarding real GDP growth and the projected growth of 1.7%. As I mentioned in one of my previous questions, economists are disagreeing with this NDP government's outlook, considering the economic and fiscal realities of the current global trade environment, market volatility, among cost of living challenges. Manitobans are spending less into the economy as they have fewer and fewer dollars in their pockets. So does this minister still project a 1.7% real GDP growth for 2025, ranking it among the last in Canadian provinces? As we know, Stats Canada just came out with Manitoba's numbers in 2024 being one of the worst real GDP growth in the country, well before the national average at 1.1%. So considering the economic realities that we are currently facing, does this minister still stand by the projected real GDP growth of 1.7% for this fiscal year?
the Honorable Minister of Finance.
Thank you so much, Chair. So appreciate the question from the critic. And what I can say is that, of course, as she knows, the 1.7% GDP growth target was printed in budget. We do face that threat of tariffs as every other province is facing at this point in time. As she knows very well, there is significant uncertainty about what we're facing as we move ahead. We are, of course, I think, doing the important work of ensuring transparency with Manitobans about those risks. If you look at the budget document, you can see on page 38 and 39, it spells very clearly, it spells out the potential prospective impacts of a 25% tariff scenario. So invite her to look at that, and I think that speaks to the sort of worst case scenario, and that's a scenario that we have been transparent about and have prepared for and printed in our budget, our proposed tariff contingency budget, which we would unlock in the event that those 25% tariffs that had previously been a possibility, that we would go back to and seek to appropriate supports to respond to that. So I think 38 and 39 really speaks to the worst case scenario and speaks to what could happen in that 25% tariff environment, which at this point, fortunately, it looks like they will be significantly moderated. But of course, right now, we've seen them, that those tariffs have been moderated from a 25% across the board to something that is still, of course, very concerning from an economic perspective, but still much more moderate. And yet, of course, moving forward, we will expect further changes as now that we have a new federal government in place. And as we saw yesterday, those discussions are already beginning about how we move forward together as our two countries look to find a path forward for our economic relationship. When it comes to credibility around our approach and our plan, one thing that I was just really proud of was the conversations that we had last week during the investors tour that I was on with my chief of staff and our deputy, where we had a chance to meet with those investors who are supporting Manitoba. These are institutional investors that buy our bonds at scale and really are paying very, very close attention to the fiscal planning work that we've done as a new government. And what I heard over and over and over again, not only from the investors, but also what we heard from our discussions with the credit rating agencies, was that they supported our approach, that they felt that our plan was credible, and that they deemed our approach to be prudent. That was a really, I think, telling experience for us as a province, that we went to those, those investors and those credit rating agencies, and we heard a great feedback on their perspective on how Manitoba is doing and the important fiscal planning work that we've done, and ultimately the path we outlined in our budget, which again, I think speaks to the preparation we've done during this challenging time to, in light of all this uncertainty, put forward a budget that was made for the moment, that had a very clear set of priorities that sought to create resiliency, sustainability, and more economic strength during a period of significant risk. So, I think one of the things that they responded to so favorably was the incredible work that we've done with this budget to, again, build a stronger economy and to create significant jobs and economic growth through our plan. They were very excited about our focus on trade supporting investments, specifically those kinds of investments that will expand Manitoba's role as a trade corridor, to help make sure that Manitoba businesses can get their products to market and can look to an expanded set of options when it comes to getting our goods out of Manitoba and abroad. So those kind of investments in the Port of Churchill and the rail line, in Centerport. What was clear, and this is the feedback that we heard from the investors, was they really saw a government that was forward-looking, that was focused on economic growth, resiliency, and that was focused on the things that really matter and moving our province ahead. And beyond, of course, just a more resilient economy, focusing on the other important economy supporting areas of policy like improving healthcare and making life more affordable.
The honourable member for Midland.
Thank you, Chairperson. And perhaps had the minister not been talking in hypotheticals as it related to U.S. tariffs over the past number of months, then his budget could have properly reflected the economic realities that Manitoba is facing. But instead, this budget was released March, well after Trump had announced tariffs back in January, and well after in November, when he was elected as president, indicated that tariffs would be coming. My colleagues and I, including my colleague beside me, spoke at length about this in the media and on the record about the need to have a fiscal plan that would properly reflect what impact the tariffs would have on Manitoba. And this minister's response was that he would not be speaking in hypotheticals. However, as we all know, those hypotheticals quickly became a reality, and this budget missed that moment and missed that mark and did not reflect the realities that Manitobans were already facing at the time that this budget was released. So as it relates to the projected 1.7% real GDP growth for 2025, the minister's numbers are not adding up. The minister is projecting that growth at 1.7%. However, his revenue is projected to increase by over 1.7 billion from last year's budget. So if we look at page 12 of the budget documents, last year's fiscal revenues were already down by roughly 70 million. Budget last year was over 23.267 billion versus projected 23.337 billion. This year's budget, the minister is now predicting revenues will go up by 1.7 billion from previous year. Economists are saying that there is a possible, some are saying probable, economic recession coming, comparable to the 2009 economic crash. We know that tariffs are having an impact. There are very, very few affordability measures announced in this budget beyond just a few tax deferrals. Plus, this minister's increased taxes on seniors, homeowners, property owners, and workers, all paying more under this NDP government. As we know, when Manitobans are taxed higher and we have a weaker economy and projected job losses, Manitobans have less disposable income to put into the economy. Economists have already indicated that this budget was too rosy, as I already mentioned, rather than properly planning for the fiscal realities that we were going to be seeing in 2025. This minister said that he would not talk in hypotheticals. So I must ask the minister, where are those revenues coming from if his GDP growth doesn't meet the 1.7% target that has been laid out in this budget?
The Honorable Minister of Finance.
Good to have the MLA for Steinbach joining us here tonight. To the question that was asked by the critic, so again, we do continue to see significant uncertainty, of course. President Trump's tariff approach seems to change and shift, and we've seen multiple different iterations. They're on, they're off. So we continue to focus on working through this very challenging problem. And I'm sure the critic and their team appreciates the complexity involved in being able to say with certainty what the future holds when it comes to President Trump's decision making. One thing, of course, we can speak to is that the actions of President Trump have united Canadians in a way that we really haven't seen in some time, at least I would say for my generation, that we've never seen. And not only uniting Canadians in a way that we've never seen, but also uniting governments, provincial governments, to be specific. That has created an unbelievable opportunity for us as a province, as the province of Manitoba, because we now know that while for many years talks about reduction of internal trade barriers have been bandied about, been discussed, we really haven't been able to make progress as a country in reducing the scope of those internal trade barriers. And one of the things that I think, again, we can look to, not as a silver lining, but at least something that we can all agree on, that is President Trump has united us in a way that we've never seen in this country in recent memory. And that opportunity that has created when it comes to the reduction of interprovincial trade barriers is massive. We've seen economists speak to the scope of that opportunity, the estimated extent of that opportunity. I think I understand that it could increase Canadian GDP by as much as $200 billion. That is an enormous lift to our country's GDP and potentially to provincial GDP. That could really be a remarkable opportunity for us all and for businesses throughout provinces in Canada. Now, beyond that broader opportunity, we know that in Manitoba, we stand to have an outsized benefit from the reduction of interprovincial trade barriers. And one of the reasons for that is because we as a province have one of the lowest number of exceptions under the CFTA of any province. In fact, I think actually we have the lowest number of exceptions, and I believe it's only nine exceptions. So that means that as we go forward as a country and we work together with other provinces to try to reduce those barriers even further, Manitoba has an outsized opportunity here. The opportunity is relative to other provinces is much bigger because frankly, we already are a relatively open jurisdiction when it comes to internal trade. And so as we move forward in partnership with other provinces, and I'm excited to say there's some news coming on this, and it's going to be very exciting indeed in the not too distant future. We know that Manitoba is in an incredible position. And so very excited about the important work that's being led by our Premier and by our Minister responsible for jobs on this front. We know that we need to keep pushing to ensure that we don't let this moment pass us by. And I think about when I was on that investor tour last week, meeting with some of the institutional investors we were fortunate to connect with, hearing from them how for years I think there was recognition of that opportunity, but a lot of skepticism about the willingness of provinces to do it, and the amazing sea change that they're witnessing in Canada from provincial leaders in terms of their willingness to get down to do the hard, detailed work necessary to make this happen. And it is, frankly, a lot of very detailed work looking at, NAICS codes and products and understanding all these archaic things that are preventing goods, services, and people from moving freely across our borders to create more opportunity. And I think, in Manitoba, one of those areas where that opportunity is really outsized is in services, professional services. And look, in this future environment where we're going to see lowering of interprovincial trade barriers, Manitoba, with our affordability advantage, with our incredibly low cost of living, our low hydro costs, thanks to the work that our government is doing, just affordability advantage in general, is going to make us an even more attractive place to move and build a business.
The honorable member for Midland.
With all due respect, Chairman, to the Minister of Finance, there has not been anything done to remove interprovincial trade barriers by this Premier. That work was done by Brian Pallister and his team, which launched the path forward. However, there's still more to be done, as we all know. But in fact, that this minister and his Premier are holding up legislation to do that very thing by not passing Bill 227, the Free Trade and Mobility Within Canada Act, which is consistent with what other provinces across the country are doing. So while other provinces are well ahead, Manitoba is falling behind, as we see time and time again. It is all talk and no action by this minister and this NDP government. So they may say that they're doing things, however, they are clearly not. But I want to go back and just very clearly put on this record the numbers that I had spoke to earlier, and perhaps this minister can answer that question that I had asked. Looking at page 12 of the budget documents, and I will repeat some of these numbers into the record. Last year's fiscal revenues are already down by roughly 70 million. Last year's budget was 23.267 billion versus the projected 23.337 billion. This year's budget, minister is now predicting revenues will go up by 1.7 billion from previous year. So I'm going to ask the minister again, where are those revenues coming from if his GDP growth doesn't meet the 1.7% target that he's identified within these budget documents? As we know, economists across the country are indicating that his revenue outlook is too rosy. So where are those revenues going to come if that doesn't get met? Is he going to increase taxes on Manitobans to cover off that revenue projections?
The Honorable Minister of Finance.
Thank you so much, Chair. So again, when it comes to prudence and the important work that we've done and the potential risks we're facing, again, I pointed already for the critic as you can see in budget, we were transparent and outlined risks in pages 38 and 39, so I invite her to go back to those pages. Again, the response to those risks is reflected in our tariff contingency budget, which did the important work of being very transparent with Manitobans about what we would do in the instance that we saw those risks manifest. But again, the question is, in this environment of uncertainty and in this environment where we don't, at this point, have clarity over what the scope of those tariffs would be, what Manitobans have a right to expect is that their government would be doing the important work of creating the most resilient economy possible. And I think that's exactly what this budget sought to do. And of course, I've had a chance to talk a bit about this already today, but I'm delighted to be able to speak to it more. The centerpiece of that budget was a capital plan that will create an estimated 18,000 jobs in Manitoba, building the infrastructure that we need and that frankly, where we fell behind in a really significant way when it comes to economy supporting infrastructure like the schools we need to make sure that families that move to Manitoba have a great school for their kids to go to. That the seniors that move to this province or that our residents have access to PCHs to make sure they can live in a dignified way and get the care they deserve. So significant investments to support, again, a strong economy. And then, of course, economy supporting investments like our investments in the Port of Churchill, the rail line, Centerport, our commitment to Twin Highway 1 to ensure that trucking corridor can be leveraged as it needs to. These are the kinds of investments and shows the focus of a government that is worried about ensuring, or that is focused on ensuring that we have a sustainable and growing economy, even in light of all the uncertainty we're facing. Beyond that, of course, the budget outlined a significant list of other really important priorities that we continue to work through, whether it be the great work that's happening and the great progress that we're making on interprovincial trade. And again, very excited about what the near future holds on that front. Buy Canadian, we committed to ensuring, led by our fantastic minister responsible for public service delivery, that we, just like Manitobans who are making different purchasing decisions and wanting to make sure that as they spend money that they're doing everything possible to support our local economies, they want their government to do the same, and our budget leans into that, and that Buy Canadian legislation we brought forward will help to bring some of those expenditures that are currently going to the U.S. Back to Canada and ideally as much as possible back to Manitoba. Beyond that, of course, energy infrastructure. Look, I spoke to this earlier today. It is no exaggeration to say that the former government left us in not only a terrible fiscal hole with a $2 billion deficit, but also the energy infrastructure deficit that they had created was significant. It is frankly embarrassing thinking about the fact that we went 7.5 years where when it came to energy, we made no progress of any kind other than to focus on finding new and novel ways, as I say probably way too frequently in the House, to raise hydro rates. Where we saw the former government focus on raising hydro rates in bits of bills. That's the first time that's ever happened in the history of this entire province that a provincial government decided to raise hydro rates in a manner that did not have the benefit of having any oversight from the Public Utilities Board, meaning they raised hydro rates there in a way that ultimately we'll never know if that increase was needed because the Public Utilities Board never had a chance to review it. They just rammed it through. And ultimately, I think that just speaks to where really the former government was at when it came to energy. It really wasn't about building the infrastructure, building a path forward. There was no vision for ensuring we had the energy we needed to grow our economy. And unfortunately, we had to move really quickly, but I think we've done that in the right way. And then beyond that, setting these foundational pieces in place like a critical mineral strategy that I'm so proud to have seen be put forward by my colleague, the Minister responsible for jobs, who has done remarkable work setting the stage for us to unlock more opportunity. We've got 2 mines that are coming online since our government has come in. There's a new gold mine, thanks to Alamo, making those investments in concert with the work that we've done with Hydro to help make that happen. And there's a new potash mine coming online in 25-26. This is the work of a government that's focused on building jobs, creating a strong economy, That's why Manitobans sent us here, and that's exactly what we're doing.
The Honourable Member for Midland.
Oh, the hypocrisy of this minister who gave himself the sweeping powers to increase hydro rates by 4% in an order in council, while also fearing with the Public Utilities Board by announcing a political gimmick rate freeze earlier this year. But I do have, just going back onto tariff analysis, and during health estimates, the Minister of Health said that the Finance Minister would be able to answer this question. So has the Finance Minister done an analysis of the impact of tariffs on drug supply, medical equipment, etc.?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you so much, Chair. So to the question that was asked, the critic might have seen that just yesterday Trump announced tariffs on pharmaceuticals that are going to be coming forward, I think, in 2 weeks is what we're hearing. The details in 2 weeks. So, you know, I'm surprised that this question is being asked and that it's clear that right now we are all facing a lack of clarity about what exactly will transpire when it comes to pharmaceuticals or other healthcare goods. We are monitoring this very actively, and we'll certainly be watching very carefully in the weeks ahead, but we don't know what that looks like at this point because no one knows except Mr. Trump. So we're looking forward to getting a little bit more clarity around those impacts so we can understand you know, the consequences here in Manitoba. It is important to go back. I think the critic did reference you know, their approach when it came to hydro rates, and it gives me a great opportunity to just dig a little deeper into what happened under their leadership when it came to hydro rates. And I'll remind the member that for 3 years in a row, they brought forward a bill that I think was most recently called Bill 36 that was fundamentally about kneecapping the Public Utilities Board and setting hydro rates at the cabinet table. And any suggestion that our government is, you know, following in their footsteps needs to be clearly put to rest. And I'm happy to do that here today on the record, which is to say our government very proudly stands behind and understands the important role that the Public Utilities Board plays in ensuring independent oversight in rate setting. And unfortunately, for many years, the former government worked to undermine that role that they played. That's not partisan spin, that's just a fact. And anyone who's interested can look at the pieces of legislation that the critics team brought forward year over year which sought to set hydro rates at the cabinet table. You don't have to be an economist to know that that is a bad idea, to have, financial targets for a Crown corporation set without any real connection or understanding of what the fiscal pressures or financial requirements are for that organization. And that's exactly what they did. The bill sought to identify extremely aggressive fiscal targets for hydro, which were completely detached from hydro's actual financial needs. And there was a clear purpose to that. Why did they do that? Because by setting aggressive financial targets for hydro at the cabinet table, that was going to trigger massive hydro rate increases. That's the situation that they had set up for Manitobans. That is, a direct impact on Manitobans' wallets, because ultimately Manitobans under that scenario don't have the benefit of knowing that the independent regulator, who's there to ensure we pay the most affordable rates possible, is overseeing that rate setting. And what that bill proposed to do was to have the pub's role be switched from one focused on ensuring that hydro rates were set in a way that reflected hydro's financial needs, to instead having the pub's role be relegated to simply being there to determine whether hydro was meeting their government's financial targets when it came to hydro. That is bananas. And, we saw civil society and others rise up in response to that, because Manitobans knew that that was a formula for ensuring very fast raising hydro rates that would have realistically placed a significant burden on current generation of Manitobans, as opposed to having that burden be spread over an amount of time that would reflect hydro's actual needs, their actual fiscal position. That is the difference between the former government and our government. They had a reckless focus on jacking up hydro rates as quickly as possible through, as I mentioned earlier, and the words I've used too often, new and novel measures, whether it's putting hydro rate increases in BITSA legislation, where Manitobans will never have the opportunity to understand whether that increase was needed, or whether it was to put legislation forward that would ultimately have hydro rates be set at the cabinet table by having, the last former government and their cabinet determine financial targets for an organization that were completely detached from the reality that hydro was facing. That's the difference. That's really, I think, what Manitobans, the message that they sent to the former government was clear when they kicked them out of government, and they brought in a government that's actually focused on their needs and ensuring affordability when it comes to hydro rates.
The honourable member for Midland.
Well, Manitobans would all agree that it's a bad idea to interfere with the Public Utilities Board by bypassing it to announce a rate freeze without the Public Utilities Board being able to review that through interveners and the proper process. And Manitobans would also agree it's a bad idea to announce a rate freeze and then announce an 11% hike less than 6 months later. And that did happen under this minister's watch, and as a result of this minister's bad decisions and poor fiscal planning. I do want to go shift gears a little bit and go back to some comments that the minister made during question period yesterday, as well as he's referenced it a couple times during these estimates today. The minister indicated that he's met with investors and credit rating agencies. So as we know, last year our ratings were A+ stable from S&P, A high from DBRS, and AA2 from Moody's. So easy question to the minister. Did the minister meet with all 3 credit rating agencies recently? If not, does he plan to? And in those meetings, did he go there, or are those agencies coming here, or a bit of both? And if so, which ones?
New York.
Before I introduce the minister, I'd just like to offer a gentle caution reminder that members who hold the floor should be able to speak without having other members talking over them. So I'd ask all members to show a little more respect for the member who holds the floor, regardless of who it is. Thank you so much. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you so much, Chair. So the question was, did I meet with the 3 credit rating agencies? And the answer to that is, of course. This is a time of massive uncertainty, and I'm very focused on doing my job and doing it well. That is a critical part of my role, and something that I'm very proud to say that our government has, I think, attended to in a very serious way in building strong relationships with S&P, Moody's, DBRS, as those key credit rating agencies that, of course, have significant influence over our borrowing costs through their ratings. Those meetings, which we had last week, were only the latest in terms of our efforts of connecting with those rating agencies to ensure that they have the opportunity to ask us questions about our fiscal plan and to dig into the work that we've done to ensure that we can deliver on that balanced budget target that we're set on delivering on. And I can say that all 3 of those credit rating agencies were, I think, very interested and pleased to know that we had, as a government, done something that hasn't been done in this province for a very long time, which was to do multi-year planning, to look at, as I mentioned earlier today, significant government decisions throughout the track, the impacts of collective bargaining, our commitments as government, and we were very proud to outline for them, as a relatively new government, how hard we've worked to ensure that we have turned over every stone and have looked at all major decisions throughout the next 3 years so that we can give them confidence that when we say we're going to do something, that we're going to do it. And again, that is an incredibly important part of the work that I do in my role, is to maintain those relationships, because, as I'm sure the critic knows, this is about ensuring that our costs of borrowing are as low as possible, and to ensure that those spreads are maintained and that we manage those to the greatest extent we can. We need to make sure that those relationships are maintained and that those credit rating agencies have the benefit of understanding all of that hard planning, that work that we've done, and that they're given the benefit of those opportunities to dig in and ask us hard questions. And again, I'm super proud that after those discussions, the message we heard back is that they liked what we're doing, and that they thought we were taking a prudent approach. And I hope the critic can really hear that that is something that we are focused on, and that work is hard, but it's important, and we're committed to it. She also, in her comments, talked a bit about our hydro rate freeze, which is great. I love the opportunity to talk about it. I think that is, again, an important piece of our government's commitment to keeping costs low for Manitobans. And in addition to that, our gas tax cut. We know that the last government liked gas taxes to be very high. They really focused on keeping them as maximal as possible throughout their 7.5 years. I think it was like, how much can we get out of Manitobans? How high can we make gas taxes? And our government likes them low. And that's, I think, something that we've shown. And Manitobans have responded. I think this was a very popular measure that we took in our first budget to eliminate the gas tax for an entire year. Absolutely fantastic savings for Manitobans, and especially those folks living in rural communities like the one that the critic lives in, where folks have to drive long distances to get to work, to drive their kids to a hockey game. Big savings for folks, again, but not only those folks living in rural and northern Manitoba, but also, of course, all over our province. And then, that gas tax freeze, or the gas tax holiday, we were excited and proud to have brought those savings to Manitobans, but it didn't end there. Our last budget brought in a permanent 10% cut to those gas taxes, again, showing our government's focus on cost reduction in a way that was meaningful for Manitobans who know that they face those costs every time they go to the pump. And under our government, they saw those costs go down, and we know under the former government, those costs were as high as they possibly could be. That's the difference between our records. And of course, in addition to those high gas taxes, they made it worse by their significant support for carbon taxes and voting in favor of carbon taxation. That's the record they left Manitobans with, is a government that was in favor of carbon taxes on Manitobans, in favor of high gas taxes, in favor of high hydro rates. That's a sad record when it comes to affordability. We're showing the way forward when it comes to keeping more money in Manitobans' pocketbooks.
The honourable member for Midland.
And with respect to the credit rating agencies, it's good to hear that they're pleased with the work that was started by the former PC government, as in budgets 2020 to 2023, the former PC started the multi-year planning and multi-year capital plan. So I'm sure the former finance minister, Cam Friesen, would say you're welcome to this current minister of finance. And probably more than that. Thank you to my colleague, the member for Steinbach. Just in regards to the meetings with the credit rating agencies, with upwards of a possible $1.9 billion deficit, $2.3 billion in debt servicing costs, borrowing limits at $44.4 billion, and a 7% increase in spending compared to initially predicted in last year's spending plan, on top of weak economic real GDP growth for both 2024 and 2025. What did those agencies say about Manitoba's fiscal position, and did they give any suggestions regarding government spending and restraint?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you so much, Chair. Again, grateful for the chance to talk about the important work and the conversations we had with credit rating agencies and some of the discussion and what it focused on. And what I can say is that we did talk a lot about that multi-year planning work that we had been doing to understand our cost structure throughout the next 3 years, digging deep into how we went about that work. And ultimately, some of the lessons we learned from that MNP report, which spoke to, again, really the very different approach that we saw under the former government. And, you know, we focused a lot on what we were going to do to effectively not replicate what the PCs did when they were in government. Now, we talk about what the multi-year planning that was purportedly done under the leadership of the last government and their finance ministers. The issue is that we know that they were just numbers on a page. It's not worth anything. We know that the plans did not reflect reality. So you can do multi-year planning, but if it's all imaginary time and it's not based in what's actually happening, then there's really not a lot of value to having a multi-year plan. You can look at, for example, the fact that the last government didn't settle collective agreements for years and years and years and years. They pretended that that wasn't an issue. They gave zeros to workers, including nurses, during the middle of COVID and through one of the most challenging times in our province's history. Those were all costs that were going to have to be paid at some point. Again, were those costs reflected in the last government's planning? Nope. They didn't do that work. It was all imaginary. So, you know, again, you can make a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan, a 20-year plan. If it's make-believe, it doesn't really benefit anyone. So, you know, further to that, we saw their failure when it came to collective agreements. We saw their failure to account for so many different areas of costs that they just ignored. But again, fortunately, and I think we made this quite clear with the credit rating agencies, we're focused on the hard reality, the hard costs that governments face. We looked out multiple years to make sure that we put together a credible plan. We showed fiscal prudence, and that's something that had not been shown in Manitoba for many, many years. I'm so proud, again, to work with this team, I'll say, you know, as we come closer to the end of the day today, to have amazing supports in Treasury Board and in Finance that have helped to inform the work that we've done to serve Manitobans, to make sure that we put forward a credible fiscal plan, a prudent fiscal plan, and one that will ensure that we, again, in light of the risks we're facing to the south of us, have the most resilient, strongest economy to protect jobs here in Manitoba.
The hour being 5 p.m., the committee rise.